This video is about doing application problems for exponential and logarithmic functions. The first problem we're going to look at is compounding periodically for interest problems. The formula that we're going to look at is A equals P times 1 plus R over N times N to the T power. When we look at this particular formula, let's look at what each of these letters represent. The A, of course, represents the total amount. It's going to actually include your principal and interest. The P is going to represent your principal or initial amount, whichever way you want to think of that. The R represents your interest rate. That is usually given to you as a percent, and so you're going to need to change it to a decimal. The T is representing your time, and the time needs to be in years. So if it's given to you in months, you would need to do ever how many months out of 12. So you need to think about that. The N represents the number of times compounded during the year. So this usually depends on the institution that's providing this. So you will see quarterly, that is 4 times a year. If we have monthly, of course, that means 12 times. If we have weekly, of course, that means 52 times. And we also have daily, which we use 365. Occasionally, some people will only use 360, but sometimes that number is adjusted accordingly. So let's look at our first example problem. We want to invest $1,000 compounded quarterly for 3 years at 6%. So we're going to set this information up using our formula. So A equals 1,000 times 1 plus 0.06 over quarterly means 4 times a year. And we use the 4 again. The total number of years is 3. So the first thing we need to do is to calculate this amount inside of the parentheses and get that amount. You can do the whole thing in your calculator at one time, just to be sure you use your parentheses in the correct place. With your fraction, be sure you put a parenthesis around the entire thing before you raise to a power. Be sure you put parentheses around the entire exponent. If you don't get your parentheses just right, you will not get the correct amount. So sometimes, especially as starting out, I recommend to students to do this independently. So I'm going to show you on your calculator here. I hope this doesn't glare too much for you. So we're going to do 1 plus parenthesis 0.06 divided by 4. And that's my fraction, and get that amount. So that is 1.015 for what's in parentheses. And that is raised 4 times 3 is to the 12th power. Now, I probably can put the rest of it in the calculator correctly from there. So I'm going to do 1,000 times parenthesis 1.015 parenthesis. When I raise to the power, I'm going to use that caret. Yours may not look exactly like that. Some calculators will automatically raise it. Some of you just show it with a caret. I'm going to put parenthesis 12 to be sure it is represented correctly there. And then put that in the calculator, and there's my final answer. Since I am dealing with money, I am going to round this to the nearest cent. So that is $1,195.62 for my total amount. Now let's do one more example. So I have $2,500 that I want to compound monthly for 18 months. At 5.5% interest. So again, the first thing that I'm going to do is to set this up in the formula. A equals 2,500 times 1 plus 0.055 over 12 for monthly times 12 again. And for 18 months, that's 1.5 years, so that's 1.5 that I'm using there. So again, going to our calculator, again, I can use and calculate what's in parentheses first. 1 plus 0.055 divided by 12, parenthesis, and enter, and that decimal becomes 2,500 times 1.005. I'm going to round that, and then 12 times 1.5 is 18 for my power. So my next step would be 2,500 times 1.005 raised to the 18th power. Again, to the nearest cent, that's going to give me the total $2,734.82 when I finish that. Remember to put your dollar signs and all that good stuff, because we are dealing with money here, that we want that correctly. All right, our next problem is dealing with compound continuously. And we use the formula A equals P E to the RT. I often use the little slang term, the Pert Formula, when we deal with continuous, and similar to our periodic, we have A to be the total amount, which is principal and interest. The P, again, is going to represent your principal. Another way to think of that is your initial amount. Whether you're doing a loan or investment, either one would be calculated the same way. That E value is that special value that we talked about for exponential functions. The R represents the interest rate. Again, that is a percent that we're going to use as a decimal. And then the T would be the time, again, in years. Okay? And so as we look at our example problem here, we're going to invest $2,000, compound it continuously, for 2 years at 4%. So anytime it says compound it continuously, that's a clue to us to go to our Pert formula. So to set this up, we would have A equals 2,000, E, our interest rate, 0.04, our time for 2 years. So usually we can put this in our calculator with one stroke or one setting. So we're going to do 2,000, second in E, and we're going to do 0.04 times 2 years. And press enter. And so we get the amount to be $2,166, rounded to the nearest penny. That'd be 57 cents. And so that represents our compounded continuously.